Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, May the 20th, 2025. As always, I'm going to be talking about the day in question, and the day in question is Tuesday, May the 20th, and I'll be looking at the astrology and the I Ching and the 12 signs for this day, Tuesday, May the 20th. And also, I want to consider the horoscope of Joe Biden. So a few videos ago, I mentioned the fact that he had a demi-return. In other words, when the sun was exactly opposition his sun, 6 months after his last birthday. And I mentioned this looked a bit difficult for him and that maybe he needed to look after himself. And, as it happened, we have found out that we have this diagnosis of prostate cancer, an aggressive form of this disease. And that is a big news story at the moment. So in this video, at least at the end of this video, I want to have a fairly detailed look at Joe Biden's horoscope and why things might be looking a little difficult for him. But in this case, I'm looking at him as a human being. Previously, when I've looked at Joe Biden, I've looked at him as a politician. But now it's just a human being who's had a cancer diagnosis, and we have a timed horoscope. So I think it would be, a good opportunity to look at astrology and to look at the astrology of health. Although I'm not really a health astrologer or medical astrologer. That's not really my specialization. But before we do all that, let's look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Tuesday, May the 20th, 2025. Don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. And so here it is. Here is the chart for today, set for noon, New York time. And the moon is in Pisces, set for New York. So the moon is at 1 degree 59 Pisces. So the moon goes into Pisces at 1:28 p.m. London time. So early afternoon if you're in Western Europe. And if you're in the Americas, well, this morning, moon moves into Pisces. That would be at approximately 6 in the morning in California, 9 in the morning if you're in the east coast of the United States. So if you're in the Americas, you can really regard it as being a moon in Pisces kind of day. And elsewhere, well, the moon will change signs. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, well, it won't be until pretty late that the moon does make that sign change. But it is an important sign change. We've had the moon in Aquarius, a sign ruled by Saturn, quite a tough-minded sign, can be rather inflexible because Aquarius is a fixed sign, and then moon moves into Pisces. Suddenly there's flow. The moon moves into a water sign. And so, there may be a sense that things are starting to move, at least on an emotional level. And that's not the only sign change we've got. We've also got the sun moving into Gemini. So the sun moves into Gemini today at, I think it's 5 to 8 in the evening London time. So if you're in the Americas, that's going to be around lunchtime, early afternoon. So that is, quite a big event. The Gemini season has started, and again, more change. So what we've actually got is we've got the moon moving out of an air sign and the sun moving into an air sign. And so the next month, the sun will be moving through the sign of a Twins, and it's that time of year when there is a little more variety, more flexibility. So, in fact, with the sun and the moon are both moving into mutable signs. So that just does mean that it's easier for things to shift. People are not so set in their ways, and that might be rather a good thing. And in fact, the sun and the moon are making a square aspect, so we have a last quarter moon. So we've got a new moon coming up, which is on, I think it's May the 28th, isn't it? Yeah, May the 28th, sorry, May the 27th. Might even be May the 26th, depending on where you are. So May the 26th, May the 27th, we've got a new moon. And that new moon is going to be in 6 Gemini, a couple of days before my birthday. I'm going to be 63 on May the 30th. And so last quarter moon, when we're dealing with this last quarter moon, we need to think back to the new moon. The new moon was on April the 27th. The lunar cycle is now coming to an end. And it might feel that with this last quarter moon that it's just a last chance to sort something out if something hasn't already been sorted out. And if you don't get it together now, well, maybe you'll have to wait until the end of the month. So that might be how the last quarter moon does manifest. And that last quarter moon takes place at last quarter moon takes place at 29 Aquarius. So that last quarter moon in Aquarius, sun in Taurus, it has a certain fixity to it. So just before the sun and the moon change sign, there's a final clash between the two. Something needs to give, maybe. And when you think about fixity, you think of something breaking rather than bending. And so maybe that last quarter moon is about a situation where something has to give, and it's not about just adapting. So what is it with that last quarter moon? Maybe you'll just realize that something isn't working, or it could be that just something has to be done and the old ways are just not working. If you don't get it sorted out right now, you're going to miss your chance. And aside from that, the moon is making a trine to Jupiter, especially at the beginning of the day. We've got the moon in Aquarius making a trine to Jupiter in Gemini. So the day starts off for many of us on potentially quite a fortunate note. Moon trine Jupiter. Perhaps we can make things happen. We can get things together. Before we have that last quarter moon, when finally we realise that the options have potentially run out, and then moon moves into Pisces, and it's a slightly different situation. So that's the main stuff going on. Also, moon is making a square to Uranus, so moon makes a trine to Jupiter, but then the moon in Aquarius makes a square to Uranus in Taurus. Now, one aspect that I should mention is the fact that the sun is making a sextile to Saturn, and you could argue that really is the main aspect of the day. It's the sun is relatively slow moving, at least in comparison to the moon. And so we've got the sun at 29 Taurus making a sextile to Saturn at 29 Pisces. And so maybe with that sun sextile Saturn, this is an opportunity to get things together, to stabilize something. Remembering also that last quarter moon in fixed sign. So if something hasn't been properly sorted out, it seems to be a bit of a mess, that sun sextile Saturn is a chance to really clarify things and to make something permanent if that's what you want to do. And this sun Saturn aspect is a sextile, so it's not like a sun square Saturn, which is really tough and might be a rather repressive influence. Sun sextile Saturn is about using your abilities to make something concrete. So that's the picture for New York. Let's quickly look at the the picture for Sydney, Australia. So Sydney, Australia, at noon in Sydney. Remember, this is a representative of Australasia and East Asia. The moon is at 24 Aquarius. So if you are in Australasia, moon is going to pretty much be in Aquarius all day, and moon is making a trine to Jupiter. Now, that moon trine Jupiter may not be felt if you're in the Americas, but if you're in Australasia, it may be the main aspect of the day. You don't have to worry about the sun going into Gemini. Sun goes into Gemini tomorrow, and so with moon trine Jupiter, it could actually be quite a lucky day, and you just have a chance to get something together, and something really fits, and if you give it your best shot, then the universe may really start to work in your favor. And then there is the heliocentric view, where we put the sun at the center of the solar system. And we talked about the sun making a the sun making a sextile to Saturn. Now this heliocentric chart is, I've actually gone for the wrong day, so I need to just move it forward a week. Sorry about that. That is a heliocentric picture. So there you can see that the Earth is still making an opposition to Uranus. So we had Sun conjunct Uranus over the weekend, and that means by definition it's Earth opposition Uranus from a heliocentric view, and Earth is still making that opposition to Uranus. Look, Earth is at 2953 Scorpio, because heliocentric Earth is always opposition geocentric Sun, and the Earth at 29 Scorpio is making a trine to Neptune. And so Earth trine Neptune, that may allow us to potentially tune into things. It's quite a spiritual aspect. If we make an effort, we can get an idea about where the universe is heading, and perhaps what the universe wants us to do. We all have a role. It's sometimes really difficult to understand what that role is. And I do wonder how that works. Maybe we all have a chance to make the most of everything in front of us, but maybe most of us don't avail ourselves of that chance. And additionally, this chart tells us that Mars is starting to make an opposition to Saturn. Now, that opposition between Mars and Saturn has been building up, and it's getting closer. And it's now just 3 degrees away. And so, Mars opposition Saturn can be a frustrating influence. Monday, yesterday, we had Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn, so it's a problem. It can be tough, and things might not work as well as we'd like. And so heliocentrically, Mars opposition Saturn, it could be a week where it might feel, for some of us, that things are starting to get difficult. It may even feel like they're grinding to a halt, and we just have to do something to create action. But if we, or this may not be us, it's probably governments, states, they get frustrated, they want to do something. Maybe Trump will be frustrated about the Ukraine or something going on in his own country in the US, and just feels he has to force it. And if you try to force things when Mars is opposition Saturn, very often there are unfortunate results. So that's the heliocentric view. I'm sure I've missed something, but I'll have another look at the heliocentric picture tomorrow. And I am now going to look at the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, May the 20th, 2024. 2024. Sorry, it's May the 20th, 2025. Aries. Aries, the moon is changing signs. It's moving from Aquarius into Pisces. And this sign change, is certainly going to have an effect on you if you're in the Americas. So if you are in the Americas with this sign change, you might feel that you do want to slow down. And that might be a good idea, because it actually could be difficult to get things done. So yesterday, Monday, we had a sesquiquadrate between Mars and Saturn. Now that Mars-Saturn sesquiquadrate, it is breaking up, but it's still in operation. And because of that sesquiquadrate, you might be of a view that things really are hard work, that few things come easily, and you could keep trying, just hoping that somehow you'll find a way of breaking through. But maybe it would be better to just wait. I mean, things will improve. Now, if you are in Australia or New Zealand, or if you're the kind of person that wakes up very early, then the situation may be slightly different, because the moon will be in late Aquarius, and it will be making a trine to Jupiter. So there's a chance to say something, to express what you really think before it's too late. But even then, there is a feeling that maybe it's still a waste of time. Just because other people are enthusiastic, and I think people might give the impression of being positive, wanting the best and being encouraging. Just because they are doesn't mean that anything will come of it. And however good things are, there's still, I think, going to be a sense of frustration that things aren't just configured as they should be. And it's not your fault. It's no one's fault. It's not really about fault. It's just about the way things are. And this planet is slow. At least it feels slow today. And you try your hardest, but still something's being held back. And it's not just going to happen. You can take initiatives as much as you like, but it's not going to work. And that is especially the case if you either do things on your own, or you take an antagonistic posture. You might take an antagonistic posture, and with good reason. If other people are being uncooperative, then why should you have good thoughts about them? Why should you be cooperative back? But Aries, I do think it's important that you don't lose your faith in human nature. Not everyone is a problem. Not everyone is just totally obsessed with themselves and their own selfish interests. There are people who really are there for you, and can be helpful. And I have been emphasizing this point again and again, because I've been talking about this trine between Venus and Mars. This trine between Venus and Mars is now very close. It's less than a degree away. So this Venus and Mars trine shows that if you have an open mind, and if you're willing to give people a chance, without judging them, then in the end they may actually show themselves to be really spectacular. But you've got to give them a chance. And I actually think that if people will appreciate being given a chance. So, even if things haven't got worked out in the past, even if someone has let you down in the past, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to let you down in the future. So that may say something about relationships. And if you really look at some of the relationships in your life, you can actually start to see the way they could work out, the way they could be a real positive for you. So that's today. I would like to be a little bit more optimistic, but things can be frustrating, and it's just important that you don't take things to heart and that you can see beyond the current situation, because soon enough things are going to change. In fact, things are already changing. The sun is kind of almost in Gemini. In fact, this evening, if you're in Europe, the sun moves into Gemini. Could be lunchtime, sun moves into Gemini. Could be tomorrow, the sun moves into Gemini if you're in Australia or New Zealand. And the sun moving into Gemini for the average Aries is going to be helpful. And in tomorrow's video, I'll be going into more detail about what it means for you for the sun to make this sign change. Taurus. The Taurus season is coming to an end. The sun is really very nearly out of Taurus. It's, in fact, this morning, if you're in California, it leaves Taurus before noon, and so that might be a bit sad. I mean, it was nice when the sun was in your sign, but as the sun leaves Taurus, you may feel that you want to finish something up. So something you'd been working on over the last few weeks, and if you have a chance to really see it through, then that might be something you want to do, and that really could be worthwhile. And while you're at it, Taurus, don't be lazy. It's absolutely not a day for being lazy. You have to make a special effort to see things through to a conclusion, and you should not be complacent. You shouldn't think that everything is going to sort itself out all by itself. You've got to make it happen. And you really, Taurus, you should have high expectations of yourself, and you shouldn't be satisfied with something that is just merely okay. It has to be great, or at least that's something you have to aspire to. So if you do push yourself, Taurus, I do think that you're going to see some really spectacular results. So keep going. And we do have a last quarter moon. This last quarter moon today, when we're going to have the moon in the last degree of Aquarius, making a square to the sun in the last degree of Taurus, and that last quarter moon, is a reminder that it could be now or never. Now, when I say now or never, I don't want to over dramatize it, but it just may be that there's something you're involved in that is really starting to work well. But if you lose concentration, you don't quite finish it, then you might never finish it. So have you finished everything today? If you haven't finished it, then get on with it. It has to be finished, because by tomorrow things may have changed. It will be too late, or it could be too late. Well, okay, nothing is too late. I don't want to put bad thoughts into your mind. Everything can be finished, but it would be so much better if it could be finished today. And the moon, when it changes sign, and this sign change should affect most of us. Sort of this afternoon in Europe, this morning in the Americas, when the moon changes sign from Aquarius into Pisces, you perhaps realize that things actually have changed, and this could be a mixed blessing. On one hand, you can see maybe that certain opportunities are starting to disappear into the distance. Not necessarily gone forever, but they may be less easy to obtain. But there are new opportunities, and perhaps what's really changed is that you might be losing your focus. You had a focus over the last few weeks, and it could have had an obsessive quality, but that focus has gone, or is going, with the moon moving from Aquarius to Pisces, and also with the sun moving from Taurus out of your sign into Gemini. The focus isn't there anymore, and you're more open to different possibilities, which you could say is a good thing, because you're more open-minded, probably easier to deal with as the moon moves into Pisces. So that is welcome, but try to make the most of what you have, and if you really possibly can, really do try to see things through. Now, while this is happening, Venus is getting ever closer to a trine to Mars, so it may be that when the moon moves into Pisces, Pisces from a Taurian perspective is quite a sociable sign, and it's sociable partly because you're able to deal with different people. You're not so stubborn, and you can accept that not everyone is the same, and because of that openness, that could feed into that Venus trine Mars, which is getting closer and closer. It's only 1 degree apart, and that Venus trine Mars, I would argue, could be about relationships working. And so now, Taurus, you're in a better state of mind for dealing with people as individuals, and not having particular views about how people should behave. And so, because you're more flexible, you're going to be more reasonable, and other people are going to find you to be more approachable. Gemini, there is work to be done. That is occurring to you. You've had thoughts, you've had ideas. You've been thinking things through, and perhaps not always being open about it. And now you see that something has to happen, and that something has to change, and change in a way that is entirely fortunate. And of course, a lot of it is connected with the fact that the sun is starting to move into Gemini. So that is a big transition. Now, I'm probably going to be talking about Sun in Gemini more in tomorrow's video, the video for Wednesday, because today it's not like the sun is in Gemini, it is moving into Gemini. And if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the sun doesn't move into Gemini tomorrow. If you're in Europe, it doesn't move into Gemini until this evening. So for many of us, the sun isn't really there yet. It's still in Taurus, but it's a change that you should certainly be preparing for. By the way, just a reminder, London time, the sun moves into Gemini at 5 to 8 in the evening. So it's that is quite late, and it's 5 to 9 in the evening if you're in Europe. Now, if you're in California, that's 5 minutes to noon. So if you're in California, then, or Oregon or British Columbia, then for the last half of the day you have the sun in Gemini. But it is an opportunity coming up, and you feel this opportunity already with the moon moving into Pisces, moon moving out of Aquarius into Pisces, and with the moon moving into Pisces, you know that something has to change. You can have all the ideas in the world, but ideas on their own are not going to get you anywhere, and so that could make you more dynamic, and you're thinking about really, what actually is possible. Now, when it comes to other people, it could be argued that you should choose your company carefully. You're sociable, you're friendly, but that doesn't mean you can be friends with everyone. And if you are not careful, and you mix with everyone, you associate with everyone, then you could get yourself into a difficult situation. People are strange. People have strange ideas, strange obsessions, strange interests. I mean, they might be interesting. I mean, Geminis are curious, but you can be too curious. And if you get too close to certain other people, you may realize that you're getting into something that is not especially desirable, and you could be dealing with other people's unpleasantness. And I won't say evil, that's too strong a word, but if you're dealing with evil, and if you're confronted, or at least if you're confronted by something unpleasant, then yeah, it's interesting, but it could drag you in. So by all means, be aware of other people. By all means, be sociable, but don't be too sociable, and just always consider the possibility that another person could let you down or lead you into an area that you don't really want to be going into. So that's something you should be very aware of. And if you want to have a useful day, then Gemini, you should probably just be taking stock of everything you've learnt over the last few weeks. Some of your ideas, your hopes, and your ambitions. Just be aware of what you've been going through, and you might have a moment where there's actually clarity. You start to see what is useful, what ideas need to be kept and need to become part of your future, and at the same time you can clear out everything else. And that brings us to the idea of focus. Now, focus is a word I probably overuse in these 12 signs. I think when I was doing the horoscope for Taurus, I used the word focus, and focus for a Gemini can actually be quite important, because if you are a Gemini, you can actually be very unfocused, and that means just having too many places that you want to go to, too many interests, and so you need to just stick to one or two. Never stick to one thing if you're a Gemini. Always stick to two things, because the Gemini is a sign of the twins. It's a double-bodied sign. But when you get into three or four things, things do go wrong. And ironically, the moon moving into Pisces might actually be a time when you do need to be focused on just two things, and you might want to interact, but interchange between the two. But decide what is important. Perhaps it's the main thing that is important. Then you have a standby thing that is important, and then everything else can be put to one side. Cancer. It's a last quarter moon today. So we had the lunar cycle, which started, I think, on April the 27th, and it's coming to an end. I think May the 27th we've got a new moon. So last quarter moon represents the idea of something starting to come to an end. So, what have you been working on since the end of April? How's it been going? How successful have you been? Have you completed all your targets, all your milestones? So if you feel that some things haven't been finished, then this last quarter might really bring you down to earth. You see, well, hold on, you only got a limited amount of time to finish, so, get going on it. So, with this last quarter moon, there might be for you a certain amount of pressure and tension. And is that a good thing? I actually think it is quite a good thing. Sometimes we need that pressure. So Cancer, if you feel there's a bit of a rush, then go for it. Other things might have to be put on hold. So it's important, Cancer, that you're not friendly and accommodating just for the sake of it. And if you've got your own priorities, then do take those priorities seriously. It does matter. And on a different note, once this moment of tension is over, things are going to get easier. You have a moment where you just feel that you're being pressured and you're not quite sure what to do. Then you actually realize what you need to do, and then things start to move. And astrologically, what we see is the moon moving from Aquarius into Pisces. And with the moon moving into Pisces, you actually feel sort of more sure of yourself and more relaxed. And it's because you know what you need to do, and you don't have to argue about it, and it's just so much easier, isn't it? And so there is a little bit of a transition over the course of a day, and it's a transition that I think in most cases is going to work in your favor. So don't hold back, and do have a confidence in yourself. And just because you have decided that certain things have to be done, it doesn't mean you should be closing your mind. It could be that the reason why recent progress could have stalled is because you hadn't been looking at things correctly. You'd seen half a picture, even 3/4 of a picture, but you hadn't seen the whole picture. And with the moon moving into Pisces, it finally makes sense. And what was missing was the emotional side of things. And you, being a Cancer, this is something you're usually very aware of. And with the moon moving into Pisces, the emotions start to flow, your sensitivity starts to flow, and you just get a feeling for the way things should be and can be. And will you be helped by the outside world? It is possible. One aspect we've got today is the Sun is making a sextile to Saturn, and the Sun is on the verge of leaving Taurus, about to move into Pisces. In fact, Saturn is on the verge of moving into Aries, and Saturn moves into Aries at the end of a week, and that's certainly going to have an important influence on you, Saturn moving into Aries, and I'll be discussing that pretty soon. But this Sun sextile Saturn could be about getting the right help, getting assistance from an outside force, or could be a person, and this Sun sextile Saturn just allows you to get things together in a way that maybe you hadn't expected. You'd assumed that help would not be forthcoming, but it's there, it's for you. Now, a lot of people might be offering their help, might be competing for your attention, but you can't accept every offer. You can't take everyone seriously. There are only one or two people who you really need to take seriously, and this Sun sextile Saturn, which is exact today, is going to show you the way forward. It could be hard work. It could be hard work in combination with other people. Probably not teamwork, but the right partnership actually with the Sun sextile Saturn might be very helpful. But another thing about Saturn, Saturn is in the last degree of Pisces. It's getting ready to move into Aries, and that may say something about some of the people in your life. It could be a partner, some other person that's that is important to you, and they may be starting to change. They may be perhaps moving away from one thing, getting ready to move into something else, and perhaps you should be aware of that. So if someone is behaving in a slightly different way, in a way that might be more thoughtful, could also be quite sort of retiring, then then don't be surprised, and you need to be there for them and to understand how people are changing and how people are trying to sort of manage change, because change is always difficult. And Saturn moving from Pisces to Aries, Saturn moving onto the Aries point, it is really quite a big deal. And aside from that, Cancer, I don't just want to talk about what needs to be done. It's more than that. And at the moment, Cancer, it is important that you are open-minded, and there are new possibilities, and it's all happening with the moon moving into Pisces. And it just could be that over the next couple of days there are things you need to collect, that you at the moment don't really know much about, and you can see where the missing bits are, and it's maybe also connected with the fact that it's a last quarter moon, that there are things which won't wait for you forever, but you're not entirely ready to see things through to an absolute conclusion. So there are things to be collected over the last few days. Information, facts, data, experiences, and on an emotional level, there are still a few things you're not entirely sure about. I think that the last quarter moon, the actual moment of the last quarter moon, was quite a clarifying experience, but even then there may still be a few things that don't entirely make sense, but over the next couple of days you can sort that out. Leo, you do want things to happen, and I think that you have the capacity right now to be able to really push yourself, and you can push yourself hard, and you could actually be quite a tough taskmaster on yourself primarily, feeling that even your best might not be good enough. So how far can you push yourself? How far do you want to push yourself? Obviously it's important that you don't absolutely run out of energy in your desperation to create an impact, but it is important that you do give it your best shot. And the reason I'm saying this is because the sun is getting ready to leave Taurus, move into Gemini. In fact, depending on your time zone, it may have already moved into Gemini. If you're in California, for example, on Tuesday, 5 minutes to midday, I think that's when the sun moves into Gemini. So the sun moving into Gemini, it's great. Sun moving into Gemini, it's something to look forward to. But have you finished with the sun in Taurus? And Taurus is an ambitious sign, and it's a fixed sign. In Leo, you're a fixed sign. So, while the sun is in Taurus, in those last, few hours of sun being in Taurus, just make sure that you try your hardest, and you can. And it's not only because the sun is in the last degree of Taurus, it's also because the sun is making a sextile to Saturn. And this sun sextile Saturn aspect is actually very motivating. It's very concentrated, and you do have the capacity to work really hard if that's what you want. And it's not just about career or things like that. It just could be about something that is important to you. And if you really, really work hard on it, then you can see real results. And hard work can take many forms. It could be hard work that's taking place on an emotional level, trying to understand your feelings, perhaps even trying to understand other people's feelings. Or it could be just trying to understand something of a bureaucratic or legal or organizational nature, really trying to understand it. And it's hard work, reading words you don't understand, really trying to understand, what the underlying issue is. And with this sun sextile Saturn, you really can get to the bottom of things, and you can really reach a point where you have an almost complete comprehension of something. And so that is something that you can work towards, and really the harder you work, the better. And additionally, don't forget, Mars is in Leo. Mars is in your sign. Mars is actually right in the middle of Leo. Mars is at 15 degrees Leo, making a sesquiquadrate to the Aries point. And so that Mars right in the middle of a Leo, Mars in the middle of Leo, just gives you extra energy. So perhaps you should be a little bit tough on yourself today. Not because you've done anything wrong, but it's because it can be a day when you can accomplish a great deal if you give yourself a chance, if you don't allow trivia to trip you up, because that is unnecessary. So what would you like to do today? And think about it, and then just go and do it. And maybe you can do twice what you expect today, or at least 1.5 what you expect today. So all I can say really is give it your best shot. Virgo, you are feeling that some things can't be ignored, and those things, might have a social dimension. As the moon moves from Aquarius to Pisces, not just a social dimension, but an interpersonal dimension. So you might like the idea of doing things on your own, in your own way, but sometimes it's difficult, and sometimes you have to accept that there is a human element that needs to be considered. So what does need to be done, and who needs to be taken seriously, and perhaps that's a real question. You can't take everyone seriously, but some people do matter, and they are going to have an impact on your life, whether you like it or not. And additionally, Virgo, you might need to be getting ready for the sun moving into Gemini. In fact, some Virgos, if you're in California, for example, will experience sun moving into Gemini at quite an early stage in the day. Now, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, then the sun doesn't move into Gemini until tomorrow. But the sun moving into Gemini for a Virgo does matter. and it's a time of year when you need to be orientating yourself towards your ambitions, especially now when Jupiter is in Gemini as well. And so don't forget to prepare yourself. The next few weeks, even the next month, and maybe until the sun moves into Cancer, is going to be important for you. And so start to think about what you need to do over the next few weeks. And in tomorrow's video, my video for Wednesday, I will be talking more about what it means for you for the sun to be in Gemini. Though for many Virgons, well, the sun is actually still in Taurus. So is that sort of Taurus-Gemini changeover. And in fact, there's a last quarter moon today in Aquarius. So we got the moon in Aquarius, and that is square the sun in Taurus. So, what does that mean for a Virgo, this last quarter moon? I think that this last quarter moon does create a feeling of urgency. I mean, urgency not in a bad way. It's just that you're trying to make sense of something. You're trying to make everything fit together and to be properly organized. But you also know that you can't be too fixed in your approach. You have to take into account external changes and also realizations. Realizations happen. You might not want realizations to happen, but sometimes they just do. And when you realize something, you have to make a change. But you can't keep realizing things. There's a certain point where you have to stop and say, well, this is as good as it gets. I can't include any more information. I can't include any more factors. This is the way it is. And so with this last quarter moon, you might have to make a decision, about what is relevant and what can safely be ignored. And you may have to be clear about this decision. And if you are clear, I think that people will listen. And additionally, it really matters, Virgo, that you don't allow yourself to be cluttered, by irrelevant factors and irrelevant people. I mean, okay, no one is irrelevant. I mean, of course, but they may not have a useful contribution today. And so some people matter, some people don't matter. And actually, some people can be not just useless, but they can actually be worse than useless. They can be a distractor, because a few Virgos may find that there are people out there who are actually leading you in the wrong direction, or actually trying to lead you in the wrong direction. So they might not be successful. I don't think they will be successful if you hold firm, but there may be people out there who don't necessarily have your best interests at heart, or else they have priorities which may actually be at odds with your own priorities. And so if you listen too hard to what another person is saying, or what another group of people are saying, and you take their priorities too seriously, you may get led down a path which you later regret. So, it's important that you are discriminating as in making choices, what matters, what doesn't matter. And that discrimination is going to be especially important in your social life, and when dealing with other people, as a whole. I think close relationships, that's a different matter. So I'm not saying that close relationships with people you know well is a particular issue, but I mean, it's something you need to be aware of. But that's probably something that I'm going to be talking a bit more about in my video for tomorrow. Libra, you perhaps feel that not everything is as it should be, that that some things are just badly organized, and maybe someone's been careless. I don't think you've been careless, but someone's been careless, and now you need to really start to think about the issue. You know, what do you actually need to do? And so there could be a certain concentration on organization, making sure that everything is how you'd like it to be, and if things aren't how you want them to be, then you're going to get upset. And it could be, Libra, that you actually have very high standards for yourself. It's not enough to be second best. It's not enough for things to kind of look okay. They have to be perfect. Well, you don't want to get obsessed with perfection, because, of course, perfection is an impossible ideal. But you nonetheless can really make an effort here to make things look good. And I think that you can be pretty successful. So you do not have to be satisfied with second best. And additionally, you don't have to be satisfied with second best when it comes to other people, the people in your life. You don't have to just accept people, making a little bit of an effort or trying to some extent to make you happy. I think that you can actually expect people, if they're going to interact with you, to give you everything. And if people don't give you everything, I mean, that sounds a bit extreme, but I think it matters that you are given people's full concentration. And if people don't give you their full concentration, then maybe you should have second thoughts about whether they're worth trusting. So if you do have high standards of another person, that is okay. At least it's okay for today. And it's not like you have to show your irritation or anything like that. If someone is not delivering the goods, appears to be letting you down, then you can just move from one place to another. You can shift your concentration, because if one area is disappointing, if one person is disappointing, then you can just move to something else. So that means that today is a day of high standards, and high standards of yourself, high standards of other people. And with that approach, you can actually surprise yourself with what you can achieve and what you can accomplish. And if you need the right kind of help, I'm pretty confident that actually you can get hold of it. Now, we do have the sun getting ready to change signs. In fact, for some Librans, the sun will already have changed signs today. If you're in California, the sun moves into Gemini at 5 minutes to noon, so 11:55 a.m. And so that sun moving into Gemini, okay, it might not be until tomorrow that you really feel the sun moving into Gemini, but with the sun moving into Gemini, Libra, that is a change, and it is a change for the better. And you're going to start to have a more expansive view, and you're going to start to be aware of, what is possible, and what you took incredibly seriously a few days ago. Next week, or over the next week, is just going to maybe not be quite so important, and you can start to have a more flexible approach. But today, I don't think you're going to really get that full blast of sun in Gemini. I think you're going to take things too seriously for that. And I think that that's probably a good thing. And it may just be, Libra, that you're wrapping something up. There's something that has been brewing. And in the past, you hadn't taken it seriously. And today, you know it really matters. And I think that's one reason why right now you do have, or should have, high standards for yourself and others. Scorpio. Mars is in an interesting position because it is right in the middle of Leo. I mean, when I say right in the middle of Leo, it's at 15 degrees of the sign. In fact, at noon New York time, it's at 15 degrees 9 Leo. So what that means is that Mars is on the Aries point. It's making an exact sesquiquadrate, 135 degree aspect to 0 degrees Aries. And so that, Scorpio, very much orientates you to the world in which you live. You know, it's not just about the people you meet. It's not just about the groups you have to interact with. It's about everyone. It's the whole shebang on this planet, and you're just aware of it all. And that can be a good or a bad thing. I mean, it can be distressing having to be aligned to this planet, but it can be an opportunity, because Scorpio, with your powerful feelings, you really start to understand the way things are going and how you might be inconvenienced by changing events, but also how you might be able to benefit from them. And so you are at the center of things, even if you are totally isolated, even if you're living in a cave, you haven't seen anyone for weeks, you are still right at the center of things. You can't ignore that. And because you're right at the center of things, there's a lot you can take advantage of. So do align yourself and see what is available, and see what might be holding you back. And you realize for sure that nothing is perfect, and you can see why things aren't moving in this world, why people are stuck. And it's just good that you're aware of it. And it may be that in your small part of the world, you can actually start to make things move in a way that hadn't perhaps been possible, over the last few days, because, the moon is moving out of Aquarius and into Pisces. So, when the moon was in Aquarius, Scorpio, you possibly felt that you couldn't do much. And of course, yesterday, Monday, Mars was making a sesquiquadrate to Saturn, and that really didn't help. You might have felt that you were stuck. But now, with moon moving into Pisces, it's a water sign. It's a flexible sign. It's mutable. There's more possibilities for action, and you're more adaptable, and you can start to see how you'd like things to be, and you can be perhaps a little bit more creative and adventurous with the moon moving through Pisces. And now you can start to think about what is the next stage. And so you start to change your part of the world, you start to unblock it, and then that has an impact on other things, and you also get support from the outside. This support has always been there, but perhaps you hadn't taken it seriously, or you discounted it, or you'd written people off. But people shouldn't be written off. That Venus trine Mars, which I go on and on about, it's now really close. It's within a degree, within less than a degree, that Venus trine Mars. So now, Scorpio, you should be increasingly aware that actually you're not alone, that your view, and it might be a somewhat negative view, is shared, and if others share your view, then things can change. And so, Scorpio, it's just important that you don't regard the world as being fixed, as something that you can do nothing about. You can actually do something about it, and in your struggle you are not alone, and getting help and support from another person, and also encouragement, it could be something that you need to be thinking about, over the next few days as that Venus-Mars trine gets closer. Sagittarius, you don't necessarily have to do anything. I mean, it's not compulsory to do anything today. I mean, today is a day when things might feel a bit slow. And that's especially if you're in the Americas. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, it could be a different picture, because in Australia and New Zealand, the moon is in Aquarius, making a trine to Jupiter, and that could be quite encouraging. It might be optimistic, and you might find that other people are friendly and cooperative, and there's a lot to talk about, and there may be a feeling of general optimism. Though if you're in the Americas, that moon trine Jupiter is from the past, and you may feel that there's not much point in continuing things for much longer, and you might just want to retreat a little. And that's the way it is. It's nothing to be especially concerned about. And in many cases, Sagittarius, the best work is work that is done away from other people, that doesn't have to be done in public. And in fact, if you are alone, or with just a few people, maybe members of your family, then things should be fine. And you're maybe going to be helped by the fact that there is a sextile between the Sun and Saturn. Now, that's the Sun in Taurus, sextile Saturn in Pisces. It's not a very dramatic aspect, but it's an aspect that can allow you and help you to get things done. So if there are things that need to be done that you maybe haven't done before, and perhaps you've postponed them, then now might be your chance, and you'll be able to get at least one or two people involved with what you're doing. Yeah, again, it could be members of your family, and then you make useful progress, and you have the satisfaction of knowing that finally something is done, something is sorted out, and you are ready for the next stage. And let's not forget that the Sun is getting ready to move into Gemini. The Sun might already be in Gemini. Certainly if you're in the Americas, the Sun will be in Gemini relatively early in the day. Of course, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the Sun won't be in Gemini until tomorrow. And I will be talking in more detail about the Sun in Gemini. But with the Sun in Gemini, that's important because the Sun moves into the same sign as Jupiter, which is your ruler. So you will have Sun and Jupiter in Gemini, and this Sun in Gemini is reminding you of what you can do, and it's also reminding you of what you can do in a partnership with other people, and it may have a lot to do with relationships. But I don't think that Sun in Gemini is a particularly important factor today. I think it's just more important that you sort things out. You make sure that things that have been building up since the end of April or since Easter are all under control, and then you can start to think about the future and its challenges and its opportunities. Capricorn, there is a wonderful aspect today between the Sun and Saturn. I mean, can we say that a Sun-Saturn aspect is wonderful? I mean, when you think of Sun and Saturn, that seems a little bit boring and controlled. But hey, you're a Capricorn. Saturn's your ruler, and the Sun is making a sextile to Saturn. So Saturn really benefits from that sextile. And so with this Sun sextile Saturn, you are really able to get yourself together. And it can be a day which is actually incredibly useful. And it's useful because you can do things in a way that is timely, and you know exactly how much effort is required. And it doesn't matter if in the past something had been in your way. You can get over it, and you do it through a slow approach. Absolutely no need to be in a hurry. Just take it slowly, keep going, keep moving, and in the end it all comes together, and it comes together very effectively. And it's very important that today you don't take sudden initiatives. You might feel you're very close to something. You're so close to it, and you can just get it out of the way, and it will be done. No, it's always got to be done properly. And if you try to rush something, it just doesn't work. And it's like pulling weeds. Well, Scotch broom. I mean, yesterday Sunday I was pulling Scotch broom, and Scotch broom is this invasive species. I mean, it's native to the UK, but it's not native to the Pacific Northwest. It's this ghastly invasive weed, and it just gets everywhere with it. I mean, it's very beautiful with its yellow flowers, and there are lots of controversies about how you deal with Scotch broom. And do you cut it? Do you poison it? Or do you pull it out? Pulling it out is slower, but that if you pulled out the Scotch broom, it's gone. It's not going to come back. But the problem with pulling out Scotch broom is that if it breaks as you pull out, as it often does, and you've left the root in, then it will just grow the next year. I mean, every Scotch broom plant apparently has 18,000 seeds, and those seeds can live for 80 or 90 years. That's just overwhelming. But if you're pulling out Scotch broom, you have got to do it properly, and you've got to use both hands. It's you might think it's just easy. You can just use one hand to pull it out. If you do that, the root will break, and next year it will grow back, or you're going to have to spend ages and ages trying to get this root out. Now, why am I telling you all this? Well, what I'm really saying, Capricorn, is that's the kind of approach you need. If you're going to do anything, it's got to be done properly. You can't think you can do it with just half a mind. Paying attention to something else, like trying to pull out Scotch broom with one hand, you've got to use both hands, and you've got to get as close to the ground as possible. So whatever you're doing, Capricorn, with this Sun sextile Saturn, don't take shortcuts. If you do take shortcuts, or if you think that you can solve everything through just a sudden initiative, then it's just not going to work. But as a Capricorn, this is something that you just know. It's obvious to you. So that's not such a big realization, is it? But don't frustrate yourself by being in too much of a hurry. And additionally, Capricorn, it seems that you come over as being a responsible person, as someone who knows what they're doing. I mean, that's always the case, but it's particularly the case today. And it's clear what you want and what you don't want. And I think that in most cases, this will be appreciated and accepted, though I don't think you need any outside support. I don't think other people are going to be especially important. But if there are people around you, then I think that you're going to be able to make your position very clear. Aquarius. Today there is a last quarter moon. So the lunation cycle started on April the 27th with a new moon. We've got another new moon on May the 27th. So the last quarter is upon us, and that is when the moon is square the sun. And what this last quarter moon is for you is it's the moon in Aquarius square the sun in Taurus. And to be precise, the moon is at 29 Aquarius, right at the end of your sign, and it is square the sun at 29 degrees Taurus. So the moon is getting ready to leave Aquarius and move into Pisces, sun getting ready to move from Taurus to Gemini, and so these planets are in square. And so for you, you might really feel this last quarter. And when we're talking about last quarters, it is really quite a critical point in the lunation cycle. The lunation cycle is nearly over. I mean, if you want to use some sporting analogy, I mean, I hate sporting analogies, but it's the last quarter of a game, you could say. Of course, in American football, they keep adding on times. It's very difficult to know. I mean, I don't know anything about American football. I don't find it interesting. I don't understand the rules. I'm not into sport anyway, regardless of what kind of sport it is. But that gives you an idea with this last quarter. There's a bit left, but not much of it. And so with this last quarter, the moon in Aquarius, it might inject a slight sense of panic here, a feeling that there's not much time left. I mean, I don't mean not much time left for you, but more not much time left in terms of whatever you're involved with, something that is important to you, and you might have been working on it, and you can see that circumstances are starting to change. You have been maybe working on something, assuming that the external environment was going to broadly remain the same, and it's now changing. And so if you don't hurry up, then it's quite possible that you could miss your moment. I mean, that actually could happen. And your first inclination might be, well, what do I need to do? Doing something dramatic, over the top, to force the pace. Well, that's not going to work. If you take huge initiatives today, you may be, try to force the pace. Yeah, it's going to be frustrating. And part of that frustration is the fact that Mars is still sesquiquadrate Saturn. And so how do you go about it? Well, you have to go about it in actually quite a disciplined way. And one aspect we do have today is a sextile between the Sun and Saturn. So what we have is, we've got Moon. Well, the Moon is actually making a semi-sextile to Saturn. It's 30 degrees from Saturn. And so Saturn is having an involvement in this last quarter moon. And of course, Saturn is your ruler. Saturn rules Aquarius. So with this Sun sextile Saturn, this does give you the opportunity to understand a problem, understand a deadline, and then be able to really move forward with it, but you have to do it in a way that is slow. It's not a situation that you can expect fast results. I said something similar to Capricorn, because Saturn rules Capricorn as well as Aquarius. Yeah, I'm afraid you and Aquarius have to share Saturn, but that's the way it is. I mean, sharing does happen quite a lot in astrology. If you're like, for example, if Mercury, Gemini, and Virgo have to share Mercury. The only two planets that don't have to share rulers the only two signs that don't have to share rulers is Leo and Cancer, because Leo rules the Sun, and Sun rules Leo, and Sun doesn't rule any other sign, and the same with Moon and Cancer. So anyway, this Sun sextile Saturn does allow you to move solidly forward. And you can certainly do it. And to be a little more specific about this Sun sextile Saturn, there could be a financial dimension here, because Saturn is in Pisces. Saturn's not going to be in Pisces for much longer. It's going to change sign, move into Aries at the end of a week. I think it's on Sunday the 25th that Saturn moves into Aries. And so with this Sun sextile Saturn, you are able to make good progress in general, and specifically that might be about money. There could be a financial aspect to it, something you take seriously. You feel that money is an area of growth, or you feel you want more money, and this Sun sextile Saturn does actually allow you to do something to improve your finances. And it's just important that you take a systematic approach. So if you feel that something needs to be sorted out money-wise, you're right to think that there might be a hurry, but you can't rush it. You have to go through it one step at a time, and in the end, if you go about it the right way, then you should get the benefits that you deserve. Now, this Sun sextile Saturn has another meaning, and it could be about relationships, and that's obviously because Saturn rules you as your ruler. Sun is ruler of your opposite sign of Leo, and so when the Sun and Saturn are in sextile to one another, that could quite literally be about you and another person getting on well with each other. So who would you like to get on well with? It might be someone you have not been getting on well with recently, or it could be someone new. But relationships are a real possibility. It's not that we're going to see dramatic events. I don't think Sun sextile Saturn is about dramatic events, but relationships can work today. But like everything else, don't be in a hurry, don't push things, don't take liberties, don't make assumptions. But if you work solidly towards the development of a relationship, then your efforts can actually pay off. Pisces, the moon is starting to move into your sign. Whether it moves into your sign early in the day or much later in the day kind of depends where you are. But if you're in the Americas, then this morning the moon will be in Pisces. If you're in Australasia, then it won't be until this evening. But one way or another, the moon will get into Pisces, and that's got to be good news, hasn't it? The moon is in your sign, and so because the moon is in your sign, you can be dynamic, at least more dynamic, and you can be more sociable, and you can feel more that you're on the right track. Especially when the moon moves into Pisces, it is actually in the same sign as the North Node, and so you may feel that you are closer to your destiny, whatever that might be. In the past, when the moon was in Aquarius, there might have been times where you felt you didn't quite know what you were doing. You weren't really very sure of yourself. But now with the moon moving into Pisces, things are clearer, and also it's going to be easier for you to be assertive, and if things aren't going your way, or you hit some kind of obstacle, then there's always something you can do, or it might be something you say. Something you say can move things very quickly, and it's just a couple of words. You might just be expressing your dissatisfaction in a way that is reasonably polite, and in most cases the person on the other side of the communication will understand what you say, and they will oblige. So Pisces, it's a day when there is more action, and additionally it's a last quarter moon, and so with this last quarter moon, you might realize that something has approached its moment. Could be something that you've been working on in your own way, and you haven't been forthcoming about it, but now you feel that the time is right, and it's a time when you can be more open, and you'll also be helped by the fact that the sun is making a sextile to Saturn. So the sun in Taurus is making a sextile to Saturn in Pisces, and so with that sun sextile Saturn, you can take the first step, and it may not be immediately obvious, but you've started moving on something. You've created a beginning, and from that beginning, everything else will develop. Now there are other things going on, particularly the sun moving into Gemini, and the sun moving into Gemini. Well, it may not move into Gemini until tomorrow, depending on your time zone. But with the sun in Gemini, that could have an impact on home and family. Remembering that the sun always moves into Gemini at the same roughly the same time of year, every year. So it's something you're very used to. Of course, every year it's slightly different, because you've got to look at what the other planets are doing. And of course, the sun moving into Gemini, it does make a trine to Pluto, and that could change your approach to your home, and what you're thinking about your home, and how you relate to your family. And that is something that I think I'll be talking about that tomorrow, because for some Pisceans, you're not experiencing the sun in Gemini yet. Certainly if you're in, as I said, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the sun doesn't move into Gemini till tomorrow. But anyway, I'll talk about all of that in my video for tomorrow, Wednesday. So having done the 12 signs, I want to consider the I Ching. And I asked a question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 26, which is the taming power of the great. And this hexagram is about discipline, and the great arguably represents us. We've got things we would like to do. There are things we want to do. We're ready to move, but we have to control ourselves. Perhaps the time isn't right, or we have not paid sufficient attention to the past. So the I Ching, when talking about the taming power of the great, does talk about the past and the sayings of the past, what people were talking about. And so this could connect with timeless wisdom. wisdom that we knew or aware of when we were younger. It might have been transmitted to us by our family or people who taught us, or a society that apparently doesn't exist anymore. And that is something that many of us will feel, that that society is collapsing, and the old ways of doing things have changed, the old wisdom has gone. But that is not true. Some things don't change, and it might be a good idea to think back to the past, and what we were told and how we were supposed to behave. And the sayings of the past do matter, and it may be a case that things from the past can constrain us in the present. And something someone said to us, I don't know, 50 years ago, it suddenly becomes real, and we do hold back. So there is a lot of discipline required today, but it's not discipline in a way that is unpleasant. It's just discipline that just feels very natural. We know the time is not quite right, and from an astrological point of view, we can see that the sun is getting ready to move into Gemini. Okay, I understand if you're in California, for example, the sun will have gone into Gemini. Pretty well, 5 minutes to 12. So the sun is not. The sun may have gone into Gemini if you're in the Americas, but there is a waiting for many of us. The sun is not quite there. Even the moon is getting ready to move into Pisces, and so there is a changeover happening, and so we need to wait for the right moment, and it should be comfortable. It shouldn't be a problem, and we just know that we have to hold back up to a point, and then the top line moves, and the top line. Well, sometimes in I Ching, the top line is quite unfortunate. But in this case, the top line is great. The top line is saying that whatever was holding us back is finished. And it may be because we've understood it. We've understood how we need to align ourselves. And we have a sense of self-discipline, and the restrictions are over. And we can now start to move forward. And so the top line moves, and so this means that we get a second hexagram, and the hexagram we move to is hexagram number 11, which is peace. Everything is in the right place here. We've got heaven on earth and earth on heaven, earth in heaven, kind of, because the three broken lines are in a natural place. They're at the top of the hexagram, and the three unbroken lines, those sort of the bottom trigram, which kind of relates to heaven on earth. That's how you might see it. Peace. There's a moment of just being comfortable after holding back, and now we see that it's all for a reason. And this hexagram, Greg Winkup, in his translation of the I Ching, he doesn't call it peace, he calls it flowing. In other words, finally things are moving, and we're not fighting things anymore. And because we've understood ourselves, and because we have self-discipline, and because we have tamed ourselves in the past, perhaps earlier in the day, we're now in the right position. So everything flows, and there's a great sense of oneness, and also just a feeling that we're in the right place, we're doing the right thing, and really there's nothing to worry about, and we can be entirely positive. So that's the I Ching, and I think from an I Ching perspective, it certainly should be a very good day. So one person who is maybe not having a great time is Joe Biden, and I want to look at his chart in the light of this diagnosis of an aggressive form of prostate cancer. I mean, I haven't gone into details about the diagnosis, and I'm not I'm not a medical astrologer, and so don't take my comments, particularly about the physical side of things, necessarily too seriously. It's a tough thing, medical astrology, and I'm not quite sure how you can do it unless you're a qualified doctor, really. Although people used to do it all the time. I mean, it's William Lilly. In the 17th century, people would actually come to him, and they'd bring a bottle of their urine to him in the 17th century, and he would somehow diagnose what was going on using astrology, and he would he'd very often be very clear and to the point. And if someone was going to die, or at least he thought they were going to die, he wouldn't mince his words. But then, of course, in the 17th century, things were easier, because at least you knew with great certainty that when you died, you would move to a better place, that you would go to heaven. But of course, now we don't have these certainties, so one maybe has to be more careful. Did I say that William Lilly, people brought urine to his office? Well, that was certainly what was done at the time. Now, that was this big thing. I'm not sure if William Lilly actually had people bring a urine to him, and whether he really inspected urine. But that's what a doctor did in the 17th century. But now let's look at Joe Biden's horoscope. So here's Joe Biden's chart. So let's just start off by looking at Joe Biden's chart without worrying about sort of transits, progressions, directions. Here is someone who has been diagnosed with prostate cancer. Does that resonate with his chart? And in saying this, I'm not saying that just because you've got a particular configuration in your chart, you're going to get prostate cancer. Well, of course, that kind of depends on your gender, doesn't it? But prostate cancer is a disease of the genitals, isn't it, or of the urogenitary tract. In other words, it comes under the rulership of Scorpio. I mean, Scorpio rules the genitals, and that's the approach with medical astrology. Kind of Aries starts at the head, and then Aries kind of rules the head, and Pisces rules the feet, and sort of Scorpio is one of the lower signs, but it's not right at the bottom, and so you might, very simply, for prostate cancer, a lot of stuff in Scorpio might indicate prostate issues. Now, I must absolutely emphasize that you shouldn't regard this as me making a statement about the sign Scorpio. I'm absolutely sure that if you did a statistical analysis, you would find that someone having the kind of configuration Joe Biden has, all those planets in Scorpio, is no more or less likely to have prostate cancer or some other cancer relating to the urogenitary tract or whatever. And that is the enigma of astrology. But Biden does have 4 planets in Scorpio. He also has a really quite difficult Venus. His Venus is in Scorpio. It's in its detriment, and it's combust. So it's a real problem. It's a real problem Venus, and he's got Mercury. He's got Mercury on the Venus-Mars midpoint. Now, Venus-Mars as a pair is connected with sexuality, and it could be connected with the sex organs. And so how do you see that? Well, in general, you'd say, well, Mercury on a Venus-Mars midpoint would be a person who is quite charismatic. I mean, he must be charismatic up to a point. or at least he must be charismatic in his political career, because he got to be president somehow. And so that may be one way in which Mercury on the Venus-Mars midpoint is working. It could relate to his prostate cancer, possibly. That might not seem immediately obvious, but I'll be explaining that, I think, sort of a bit later on. So you've got a hint there that his prostate genitalia might be an area of weakness for him, and I would think particularly of that sun conjunct Venus. You might want to throw in Chiron as well. Notice how he's got Chiron at 2853 Leo. So he's got Chiron square the Sun, he's got Chiron square Venus, and so Chiron can be a point of suffering, and it's a wound, and so that all sort of feeds into it. Now, one thing about prostate cancer, we have had another famous person having an announcement that they have prostate cancer, and that is, of course, King Charles. And so King Charles, like Joe Biden, is a Scorpio, and I don't know quite what the full relevance is here, but here's King Charles's chart. King Charles III has, he's got a different chart from Biden, but he does have the Sun in Scorpio, and he also has a moon in Taurus. So it's kind of interesting, isn't it, that King Charles and Joe Biden are both full moon people, because Joe Biden and King Charles, they both have the moon in Taurus, and they both have the sun in Scorpio. So they were born around the time of a full moon, and both of these two are these two very high-profile men who have announced that they have cancer of the prostate, and in both cases, this cancer is life-threatening. I mean, King Charles is having treatment for his cancer, and this is clearly very sort of debilitating for him. And with King Charles, he doesn't quite have the cancer, the Scorpio emphasis that Joe Biden has. But I just thought that was quite an interesting coincidence. So a few days ago, I suggested that there might be something that Joe Biden should be wary of, and I pointed out his demi-return, at that point when the Sun was actually opposition his own Sun. And we all get this, we think about solar returns happening every year, but you can have a solar return, a demi-return, which is when the Sun is 180 degrees away from your Sun. In other words, your half birthday. You can do other returns. You can do it on the squares. So when the Sun is square your Sun, you can have a quarter year return. So there are these different returns that you can have. And the chart I pointed out was this one a few days ago. I mean, it was in my video for the weekend, although I made the video on the Friday, which was the day in which he had his diagnosis that he had this aggressive prostate cancer. And so this was a chart I looked at, and in his demi-return, the Sun is conjunct Uranus. I mean, it's exactly conjunct Uranus, and also you've got true Black Moon Lilith here. So Sun conjunct Uranus, that suggests a shock. It's a surprise, and it's in this case, it clearly is not a pleasant surprise. And this Sun conjunct Uranus is fairly close to Algol. So this is how he has experienced this Uranus conjunction. So this Uranus conjunction, it happens at the time of his birthday, or rather at the time of his half birthday, sort of 6 months after his 82nd birthday because he was 82 in last November. And so that is an important transit, and so now we can start to make more sense of what's happening. So Uranus was actually going through his sixth house, was transiting his sixth house. Now, we shouldn't be too worried about Uranus transiting our six houses. I mean, Uranus has got to transit our house. I mean, it must. Uranus is always transiting some house. And 1 in 12 of us will have Uranus transiting our sixth house. So if you have got Uranus transiting your sixth house, and 1 in 12 people listening to this will have Uranus transiting your sixth house, don't worry about it. It doesn't mean anything bad is going to happen from a health perspective. But this Uranus transit was opposition his Sun-Venus conjunction, and was square his Chiron. And at the time of the diagnosis, he also had the Sun opposition his Sun, because the diagnosis happened just before his demi-return. So the Sun was acting as a trigger. So this goes back to the fact that his Sun-Venus conjunction is probably the source of his illness. I mean, I would have said that signifies the prostate cancer. I mean, I may be wrong. As I said, I'm not an expert on medical astrology, and you may know more about medical astrology than me. You may, if you're an astrologer, you may practice medical astrology. I'm certainly welcome to be corrected, or you may see it in a different way. And of course, it is linked with this Chiron. So I think that transit, really is quite important. And that's the transit. And then there is the issue of directions. So I did do his solar arc directions, and that's something that you always need to look at. And so if we look at the solar arc directions for Joe Biden, the directions actually seem to involve not his Sun-Venus conjunction, but his Mercury. And so here is the solar arc directed Sun at 21 degrees 24 Aquarius, and the solar arc directed Venus is at 22-23 Aquarius. And of course, this is also the solar arc directed Chiron. So remember, with solar arc directions, we're taking every planet and we're moving them approximately 82 degrees, approximately, and we're seeing if they make any transits. And what they're hitting is his Mercury at 21 degrees 32 Scorpio. Now, from a midpoint perspective, as I've just said, his Mercury is actually conjunct the Venus-Mars midpoint. So Mercury on the Venus-Mars midpoint, well, it could be one interpretation of Mercury on the Venus-Mars midpoint is to say he's charismatic, he knows how to communicate. I mean, whatever you think about Joe Biden, there's a reason he got to be president of the United States. And as a congressman, he was very successful, and he was, again, whatever you think of him. I mean, there are certainly issues with Joe Biden and his career, but you can't deny him his success. And that Mercury on his Venus-Mars midpoint may have had something to do with it. But we can actually look at the symbolism in another way. And Mercury on the Venus-Mars midpoint could be news about his health, and could be news about his prostate health, because we're dealing with sex organs, with the urogenital tract, and as I said, I'm not an expert on medical stuff, and so the Sun-Venus conjunction is hitting that, and that directed Sun-Venus conjunction is hitting his Mercury, and so that's when the news happens. That's when he gets the news, and so that sort of fits. And then look at Uranus. His solar arc directed Uranus is at 2637 Leo. So solar arc directed Uranus is starting to make a conjunction to his Sun. So that's more evidence that something bad is happening, and how that Sun-Venus conjunction, is being activated. Now, as far as Joe Biden and death is concerned, I don't want to speculate about his death, and we don't know how serious it is. We're told it's pretty serious, though Joe Biden, like Prince Charles, will have the best medical treatment that money can buy. And if we were to speculate on Joe Biden and when he was going to die, we would be looking for the high leg. And, the high leg is the giver of life. And we have to ask, what would the giver of life be in Joe Biden's horoscope? And the high leg can be a very controversial thing, especially when it's not obvious. So in order for a planet to be a high leg, well, if the sun is above the horizon but in certain high-legical places, then it can be the giver of life. Likewise, if a moon is above the horizon, again is in high-legical places, then it could be the giver of life. Now, the moon is certainly not his high leg. The moon is below the horizon, well below the horizon. The sun is above the horizon, but it's in the 12th house. And so because it's in the 12th house, there may be an argument that it's not the high leg. And instead, the high leg might actually be the ascendant. Or it could be some other planet. It's really complex trying to work out what the high leg is. And again, if you're watching this, you might have a view on what the high leg actually is, or what should be. But my feeling would be the ascendant. And as far as what is affecting the high leg, if we take his chart and we direct it from a primary view. So a primary direction means we're actually looking at the rotation of the Earth. So the Earth moves 1 degree. Well, it moves 1 degree every day. 1 degree. The Earth actually moves around. It moves 360 degrees in a day. So every degree of the Earth's movement on its axis is going to represent 1 year. So he was born at 8:30 a.m. If we move the Earth 82.5 degrees, then that takes us to 2 o'clock in the afternoon, because that 82.5 degrees is equal to 5.5 hours. So that takes us to 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So we actually would look at what the planets are doing and what relative to the horizon at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So here's the 8:30 time, 8:30 a.m. on November the 20th, 1942, and then we direct it to 2 in the afternoon. So 2 in the afternoon, by 2 in the afternoon, the nodal axis has come to the ascendant. Not exactly, but then we don't know if his time of birth is exact. Now, you could say, if the ascendant is his high leg, then the nodal axis hitting his ascendant could be dangerous. But I'm talking about this absolutely theoretical. I'm not predicting death here at all. I'm just pointing it out. And we don't know exactly when the nodal axis comes down to his ascendant, because we don't have an exact time of birth. But this nodal axis hitting his ascendant is certainly a difficult time for him, and it is a difficult time for him. His party has just lost the election. We had all the mess in 2024, and yes, he's just had this prostate diagnosis. And another thing that's happened is that from a primary point of view, we have in fact one of the main primary aspects he's got at the moment is he has got Mars making an in mundo semi-square to his Saturn. So, what does that mean? So, going back to Joe Biden's chart, here is his natal Mars, and so after he was born, in the hours after he was born, Mars was rising, and it rose to about this point where it was making a 1.5 houses away from Saturn. Of course, 1.5 houses is 45 degrees, and so if you go back to his directed chart, you can see that. So there's Mars has moved all the way up here, and then it's 1.5 houses away from his Saturn, which is there. So that might show that he is certainly in trouble. And it's kind of interesting that we had this news at the time of a Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn, in the sky. And I've got a couple of other points I want to make about Biden's chart, as far as profections and midpoints. So here is the chart of his diagnosis. So I don't know when he was diagnosed. I don't know where he was diagnosed, but I know that the diagnosis was made on the. Now that's a direction of his diagnosis. So here's the diagnosis chart. It was done on Friday, May the 16th, and at the time of the diagnosis, Saturn was at 2919 Pisces. So that Saturn at 29 degrees 19 Pisces was having an impact on him, because if you look at Biden's chart, there is his sun and there is his moon. The midpoint between the sun and the midpoint between the sun and the moon is going to be approximately 15 fixed. So that means that Saturn was making a semi-square sesquiquadrate aspect to his sun-moon midpoint. And, of course, Mars was going to follow that through. So the Mars and the Saturn were on his sun-moon midpoint, or approaching his sun-moon midpoint, when this diagnosis happened. So that is a difficult time for him, and it's certainly a time when he has to deal with Mars and Saturn and what they mean. Of course, Mars and Saturn are about death, or at least the possibility of death. And finally, I just wanted to look at his profections. And so, profections have become a popular technique in astrology, certainly since the revival of Hellenistic astrology. So profections talk about an annual ruler, and you have an ascendant that changes sign, every year. At least that's how you work out the annual ruler. And so last birthday, Joe Biden turned 82. So it repeats every 12 years. So when he's 84, the ascendant returns to Sagittarius. So when it's 83, it will be the sign before. So 82, his profection for when he turned 82 was Libra. And Libra is ruled by Venus. So this year, Venus is his annual ruler. And as we've already discussed, his Venus is in a really bad position. It is conjunct the Sun, and it is in Scorpio in its detriment, and it's square Chiron. And so it's perhaps not surprising that this health issue has manifested now. Now, it could have manifested 12 years ago. So 12 years ago would have been when he turned 70 in 2012. That would have been at the time of the election when Obama won his second term. So it didn't manifest 12 years ago. As far as I know, 2013 was an okay year for him. But this time round, we've got Uranus approaching the opposition of his Venus, and of course it's opposition his Sun, and also of course the Sun is triggering that, and we have this Sun-Uranus conjunction opposition his Venus, which simply wasn't around 12 years ago, and of course he's 12 years older, so 12 years older, he's more likely to have this kind of problem, I assume, than say 12 years ago. So the profection perhaps completes things, and really shows that he was under a lot of pressure, and I think that the fact that Venus is his annual ruler really hasn't helped. So that's a rather chaotic view of Joe Biden and his diagnosis. I must emphasize I'm not making any predictions about his death. I mean, obviously it's very serious, this diagnosis, but just because he's had this serious diagnosis doesn't mean that he's going to die anytime soon. And I wish Joe Biden all the best, and I wish him, if possible, a speedy recovery. So thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.